My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States. At Iba pa, my name is Elaine and I'm here with
Mike.
Producer Mike. And it's just us two. We are not in Burlado Studios. We're in Hi-Fi Studios, aka our apartment, for this special intro for TFAL meets Scott Lost at Comic-Con.
Yay.
Yay.
I don't know if you want me to react to that, but yay.
Yay. So this is a special episode. It's a crossover with the new Pencil Neck Geeks podcast that I'm going to be on with Berto Ponce and Justin Molari of the Geek Say What Network. And so this was an interview we did at Comic-Con. So the sound may be like a little different because we were in like a large room and it was kind of echoey. Scott Lost is a former professional wrestler turned comic book artist, and we go into all of that in the interview. You may know him from as being one of the founders of PWG Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, which is an indie show in Los Angeles. And he also is the head owner, or he's the owner of Accidental Aliens, which is the house that produces his comic books, which have Filipino characters in the lead, which is really awesome and really cool. And so it was really dope to talk to him at Comic-Con, and we got to really get to know him and learn about his careers. Right, Mike?
Yep.
And so that's the intro. Thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts about wrestling or comics, you can message us at thisfilipinoamericanlife@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 805-394-TFAL. That's 805-394-8325. Or you can tweet at us at TFAL Podcast. Or you can comment in the message or in the post where we post this on Facebook or Instagram. There's so many ways to get in touch with us. Right, Mike?
Right.
Okay. Thank you for listening and enjoy the episode. Hello, and this is a special crossover episode of This Filipino American Life and
the Pencil Neck Geeks podcast.
What? My name is Elaine, and we'll probably have an intro before, because I'm going to cut it in later.
There you go.
And then, but who is the one that said Pencil Neck Geeks?
I'm Berto, host, or one of the hosts of the Pencil Neck Geeks podcast.
And who else is here?
I'm Justin, also part of the Pencil Neck Geeks podcast.
Sweet. And then we have a special guest.
And I'm Scott Lost.
What? I'm going to do this ham horn and hopefully it gets through.
There we go.
And then Mike is not on mic, but he's here. Producer Mike is here. So you'll get, that's a ham horn.
He took my job. I'm usually running
There you
sound,
go.
but he's got
and
the
we are
fancy Zoom.
excited. We're excited because we're at where, Berto?
San Diego Comic-Con 2019.
Oh, yeah. I put away my phone.
It's funnier that way.
And we're here to talk comics, Filipino American stuff, and
Wrestling.
What? Yeah. So, Scott, how many?
I know about both of these things.
You know both of these
it's a good
things.
thing I'm here.
I know, right? That's
Tailor-made
perfect.
for this show.
So, who has the first question? Tag, you're it, Berto.
Maybe not a question. I was just telling Justin off mic how it's interesting how we got here, because I think it was 2 years ago at Comic-Con, all my friends were like, they got into a sci-fi party and they were all texting me, where are you? I'm like, I'm at a panel. I'm like, and I want to stick around for this panel, and that panel was the Strange Bedfellows.
Oh, okay.
It was
Right on.
about wrestling and comics, and Scott was on that panel. And that's when I was like, oh, I know Scott as a wrestler. I literally found out that day that you were doing comics.
Oh, right.
Like 2 years
the
later.
word didn't get out as well as I thought it did when I retired from wrestling. I swore I made that very, very obvious. Hey, guys, I'm going to draw comic books now, so keep paying attention to me, please. I need that crossover.
Well, it worked. We're here.
And then Berto has been my mentor. That's what I've been saying in terms of relearning wrestling, because I fell out of it and then came back.
So is the Minotaur, is that the one with the buffalo head and the
Yeah.
lower body?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
I always get the centaur is the opposite, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I used to say mentor, but Berto was like, mentor is a lot better. I'm like, sure.
The wrestling nerd.
That panel that you went to, the Not So Strange Bedfellows, I'm so happy that they adjusted that time, because it was the worst. Like,
Oh, yeah, it was late in the evening.
late in the evening
Yeah.
on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, Saturday is the party night. That's the night after
Yeah.
the convention that everyone goes around and like mingles. That's how
Yeah.
you meet people in the industry. It's
Yeah.
like you go out and you drink with them. And so, yeah, I was 1 year away of saying, I'm not doing this panel anymore. I have to go try to like make some connects. Like, it's cool to do the panel, but this the time frame was like 8 to 9. It's just like, oh, that's super inconvenient.
Yeah.
But then this year we did it again, and we got a 1 o'clock time frame. So that was great.
You know what's funny is I missed it this year because I thought it was going to be in the evening again.
Oh, that's all right. We had a good turnout. Yeah, it went pretty well, actually.
Yeah. Who else was on that panel?
Kind of the same people. There was a promoter from the Midwest somewhere, and so he was kind of the only one that was different. And the guy that normally does the moderating, he was out. Josh was out.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about some of the same stuff. We changed up a little bit. So I kind of want to talk to them next year.
Yeah.
If we do it again next year, I want to do a little bit of different questions, because it's like kind of the same questions, and I'll just go off book. I'll start talking about something else just to change the subject. It's like we talk about this all the time. I know it's not necessarily the same people going to these panels, but it's good to change up the questions.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that, you kind of, in the past, you would not really associate wrestling with comic books, but, like during the Attitude Era, people will say wrestling was like soap opera for men.
That's so weird, because I always associated comics and wrestling.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I found it's more what you were saying. Like when I was wrestling, I would talk about my comic stuff, and I actually put some comic art out one day at a show. I'm like, I want to see how this does, because like wrestling fans are comic fans, right?
Yeah.
No, it isn't. But you find a lot of comic fans that are wrestling fans. I'm like, wait, that's the same thing. Like, how come it's not translating? But a lot of the people that go to the shows, they're not necessarily comic book fans. Those are the hardcore wrestling fans. So maybe the ones that are comic and wrestling fans, those are the ones that just kind of watch it from home or whatever.
Yeah.
It's strange, because I always felt wrestling is like a live action comic book every week.
That is actually what we were saying a lot on the panel was like, well, that's the thing. The commonality is comic books are buff dudes in tights, or buff people in tights, men and women in tights, and that's what wrestling is.
Yeah,
it's buff
totally.
people in tights, and so that was a really common thread going through the podcast, or the podcast, the panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Chikara, that one promotion, like isn't
love
their whole
Chikara.
theme like there's each season is like a different superhero or like series, right?
Yeah, even a lot of their advertisements, a lot of their flyers, they were always kind of like wrestling themed, or they would even do like homages to classic covers and stuff, and they would redo it with their wrestlers. It was a fun fed. That was a real fun fed. I wrestled for them, I think, once or twice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
They're based in the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Mike Quackenbush runs it. I think he still runs it.
Yeah.
I believe so. At least according to the YouTube channel. Yeah.
And it's funny, like you see a lot of like comic book themed gear on wrestlers.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's a crossover here. There's definitely
Yeah, a lot of the wrestlers are comic book fans.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's the thing is like Chris Daniels he's like a guy I would talk to about comics a lot. Like he's completely in it, which is super cool. So
He had, which was it? Well, like there was a wrestling show where he had like a comic book like on his gear. I think it was when he wrestled the Arrow, when he wrestled Stephen Amell.
Oh, okay.
He had like a comic book on his pants. once. And I was like, oh, what is this? And I can't remember, but I'm like, that's only somebody who's super into comics would do. Like, why else would you do that?
Yeah, for sure.
Literally wrestled Green Arrow. That's hilarious.
I heard you downstairs talk about that you created your comics with Filipino American characters because you didn't see them in comics growing up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's something I feel really strong about. Like growing up, like Filipino American. I'm Filipino and white, but my parents got divorced at a young age. So it's going to, but my mom got remarried to a Filipino guy, so I grew up in a Filipino household. Like that's all I know. So, reading comics and stuff, I'm like, oh, is there any Filipino characters? And like, oh no, there isn't. Oh, there are like people will go, oh, there's like Sunfire. I'm like, he's not Filipino. And so you would kind of get these characters like just being Asians. Like, well, okay, so we'll just do Asian then, and then so we'll have Sunfire and Jubilee. Silver Samurai, I guess, and I don't know. So you just kind of like try to find who you can find. Yeah. And that's super sad. It's just like, oh, that sucks. Like, and that's not even a large amount of number. Like if you collect all of the Asian comics, it's still not a lot of characters.
Yeah.
And it's something I talked to about other people. Like one of my studio mates, Rodney. He always talks about black characters in comics, and I'm like, dude, I don't even want to hear it. I'm like, we got nothing, you know. So
you have T'Challa.
Yeah, man.
Leave me alone.
Yeah. So you got like some super good characters. Luke Cage is huge. You know, Black Panther is huge. Like, and with the movie, like all those characters blow up, and that's also. I'll go down that rabbit hole in a second with the movies. But yeah, so I always wanted to see Filipino representation in comics. There's so many creators that are in the field. And it's just kind of crazy to me that we have no one. Yeah. Like the first inkling that we almost had one was Bishop. Will Portacio created Bishop. And right before they were going to debut him, the word is the editors were like, no, make him black. We need a black character. Oh. So Bishop would have been our first Filipino character back in the 90s. And he's so popular. Dang. Imagine if Filipino Bishop was around in the 90s, how popular he would be. It would be rad.
They could retcon that and make him half.
Yeah, it would have been so good. It would have been so good.
Well, like how in Starship Troopers, like the Casper Van Dien's character, he's supposed to be Filipino.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like in the book, he's Filipino.
Oh.
But like, and then I didn't know the book, but I only knew the movie. And then I was like, oh, whatever, I'm not watching that. And then I heard that, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll go back and watch it. And then I didn't because I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, and then going into the movie aspect of it, it's just like there's no representation for Asians really in movies. It's like even the Mandarin wasn't Asian. It's like his name is Mandarin. Like, how can you mess that up? Yeah. And it's always, you always hear, well, we didn't want to offend anyone. We didn't want to stereotype anyone. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, in the comic books, he is very stereotypical. But, I mean, everybody's clever. Like, look at these Marvel movies. They made Mysterio work in Spider-Man. Like, he looks awesome. Like, you can just shave the Mandarin's head, give him the goatee, put a bunch of tattoos on him, give him the rings, put him in a suit. He's the leader of a triad. Yeah. He's the, you know what I mean? Like, that's badass. That's not... You know, like, that's super cool. Triads exist. Like, you know, like, that would be a very viable character. And, you know, even the ancient one is traditionally Asian.
Yeah, and then became, like, a Celtic.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, come on.
It's like you got the whitest white person. Like, that lady is see-through.
Tilda Swinton is so white.
Yeah, and like, they try to make it okay by saying, oh, well, it's like a title that's passed down. It's like, okay, well, could you have at least had it been an Asian woman?
Yeah.
You know, like, if you didn't want to do the Asian man, okay, sure. Do an Asian woman. What's wrong with that, you know?
They have Buddhist, like, nuns. Like, it could have worked. Those
it definitely could have. But, again, they fall back on the, well, we didn't want to offend anyone. Okay, it's offensive that you're taking away any characters that we might have had, that we could have rooted for. We got nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being in the theater during Rush Hour 2, and then Ernie Reyes Jr. came on the screen, and my theater went insane. Like, they lost their minds. And I was one of them. And then he just ran away. And, like, he didn't even fight or anything, and Ernie Reyes is a badass. Yeah. And so, like, but we were just psyched to have Ernie Reyes on the screen again, you know? It's just, like, stuff like that. It's like, for Hollywood to say, well, that's not what people want. Which people? Who are you asking? You know? Like, I don't know. Asians, there's a large population of us here. So.
Yeah. Because it's kind of like anytime you see a Filipino or Filipino American in media, you're like, I gotta watch it. I'm gonna I don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah.
And I tried to not do that, but I can't help it. I haven't seen myself on screen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to watch whatever it is. And so, when Berto was saying, yeah, Scott, he was a part of PWG back in the day, I was like, so what?
Yeah.
I was like, let me go back to YouTube and watch everything on YouTube because, that's really rad because I didn't have any of that growing up when I was into wrestling. Because when I was growing up, it was Ravishing Rick Rude's really tan and brown, but I don't think he's Filipino.
Well, that's why I love Ricky Steamboat.
Yes,
Yeah.
That was my guy back in the day because he was the only one that kind of looked like me that wasn't a bad guy.
Yeah.
Like a stereotypical bad guy.
Shoot, I even liked the bad guys. I didn't care. I love Pat Tanaka when he was in the Orient Express.
Yeah.
And he's Hawaiian, right?
I believe so, yeah.
He's Japanese Hawaiian.
Yeah.
It still counts. So then, and he do that. I used to do, actually, this move he would do. It was like a no-look flying forearm that he would do. Mm-hmm. And it turned into a body block. But, he did it so amazing. He wouldn't look. He would kind of shoot him off the ropes, and they would duck his clothesline, and he would just keep facing this way, and they would be hitting the ropes behind him, and at the last second he would turn and hit him with the flying forearm without looking. He was just timing in his head. I was like, oh my god, this guy's so cool. He's a bad guy, but I always thought that was amazing, and for a while I was actually doing that. I was like, dude, that's so badass. No one does that stuff. And on the indies, it's cannibalism. Everyone's stealing from each other on the indies. And I'm all, forget that. There's such a well of wrestling that people don't tap into. So when I was wrestling, I would always look at the old guys and see what they were doing that no one does. I remember one time I stole a spot from Big Boss Man. I was like, Big Boss Man, oh my God, he moves so fast and he was so good for his size. I thought that when I was a kid, but as someone that was working, I was just like, let me go see who's doing what.
Yeah.
And so I was watching a Mr. Perfect Boss Man match. I was watching it for Mr. Perfect, but I found myself watching Big Boss Man as well.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, dude, that was such a crazy great spot for someone his size. It was I don't know how interesting explaining spots on podcasts are.
For us, it'll be fine.
It's a wrestling show, so we're good.
I'm like, it's a crossover. It's fine.
Yeah.
Our audience
Okay.
will just have to listen.
So there was a spot where it was Mr. Perfect shot Boss Man into the corner. Boss Man slid into the corner, got up, Perfect ran at him, and threw a clothesline. Boss Man ducked, so Mr. Perfect ended in the turnbuckle. His back was in the turnbuckle. Boss Man ran at Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect went to kick him in the face. He lifted both of his legs up. Boss Man slid under the ring at the same time Mr. Perfect lifted his legs up. And so Mr. Perfect, as soon as his feet landed, Boss Man tripped him and crotched him on the pole. I'm all, holy shit, that was an amazing spot.
Yeah.
And he did it. Was so fast for how big he was. And so I did that spot a few times. I was just like, it's so cool. And I just kind of I didn't necessarily use the crotch thing, but I used elements of it. I used to do a swinging pole drop kick, kind of like a 619 on the pole. And so I did that same spot, but instead of pulling their legs out and crotching them, I pulled their legs out. I pulled their body half out of the ring by their legs, and I spun them around so their head ended up on the ring apron, draped over the ring apron. At the same time as they were spinning, I swung around the pole. So they were swinging like this. You people can't see it because we're on a podcast, but everyone here can. So they would swing like this, and I was swinging around the pole at the same time. So I kicked them in the face at the same time as they were swinging. So it's stuff like that. When I was wrestling, I would like to just try to think of old stuff and just try to modernize it, or think of something different that people weren't doing. Use the ring differently than other people were using it.
Is it crazy to you that now there's a new class of Filipino American wrestlers? Like TJP is out there, Lacey Evans, DJ Z, whose name changed when he went to NXT.
To Joaquin Wild?
Sure, whatever.
Shotzi Blackheart's out there.
Yeah, and Robbie Eagles is Filipino-Australian, and Jeff Cobb.
Falaba.
There's all these people now.
Yeah, it's great. I love that. TJ's been around longer than I have. He started, I think, 6 months to a year. I think he started a year before I did. So he was super young when he started. He's always been a prodigy. He's always been amazing.
Yeah.
It's so strange. We actually talk more now that I've retired than when I was working. It's so strange. But then, like, you know, when he got into the WWE, he was just talking to me. He's just like, "Oh man, I love your stuff. I wish you would come back. You know, try to get you a tryout or something." And I was like, "No, man, I'm done. You know, but I'm happy you're doing it." And he goes, "Hey, man, I'm sorry I was such a dick when we were wrestling, because he would, you know, once in a while he would, you know, be a dick. You know, he was aware of it, but you know, a lot of times he was cool. It was just 50-50 with him sometimes. He goes, I was young, and you know, I saw everything as a competition. I felt like I was competing with everybody to get a job. And like in a sense, yeah, you're right. That's what a lot of guys are doing. But you don't necessarily need to be a dick about it. But he said he was young, so.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, whatever, man, it's all good. And so now we talk basketball a lot and whatever, so it's cool.
Well, you live, you learn, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You're young, and like, especially if you're young in any industry, like, here's a pension to be a dick, but you don't have to be.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to cuss on here?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's not a cuss to me, so it's
okay. So he's cool, and you know, like, I've done tons of stupid stuff when I was younger too. So it's like, we get it. So
when you retired, were you like, I'm done? My body's just like doesn't want to deal with this anymore.
You know, it's funny because so I did it for 10 years. At year 8.5, I was done. I was like,
oh, wow.
I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not fun anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It stopped being fun, and it became work. And it's just like, why am I doing this again? Like, what? I don't even like doing this anymore. It's just a job that I don't get paid well at. And so at 8.5, I was just like, I think I'm gonna quit, but I think I'm gonna stop at 10 years. Because my family, they didn't want me to train at all. They didn't want me to do pro wrestling. And
what Filipino family would,
right.
though, right?
So they didn't want me to do it at all. But I told them, look, give me 10 years. If I don't, I'll be 30, and I could still do whatever else I want. And they're like, okay. They left me alone. And so at 28, I was like, you know, let me stop at 30, and you know, if I can get something going in that year and a half, then cool. If not, then whatever. And I started drawing, thinking the idea of drawing at that point again, because that's what I was doing when I was younger. When I was a kid, I would train myself to be a comic artist. I would draw a page a day, like in the summer.
Wow.
Like I wouldn't let myself go outside and play during the summer until I drew a page a day, because I knew as a comic artist,
you had to draw.
Yeah. So going back to the wrestling thing, so in that last year and a half, I just started. I was like, I don't want to try to have the best match on the card anymore. Like, I'm tired of stressing about that. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I want people to go like, oh, that match was like the best. That was the best undercard match. Like, that was the main, but that should have been, you know, Scott's match should have been the main. That's what my thought process always was. In the last year and a half, I was like, forget that. I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to have fun. Like, I just want to have fun. Make it fun again. And so, like, every match I wouldn't want to do hold to hold anymore. I did like hold 8.5 years. I don't want to do hold to hold anymore. It's so boring to me. And like to do it, like to watch people that are really good at it, it's fun to watch. But like I was fine at it. It was serviceable, but it wasn't interesting. So I wouldn't excel at that. I liked thinking of new things. So I would start matches with the jump start. Every match was a jump start. It's like, and it became a thing. Everyone knew, like, how do you want to start tonight? Jump start? Well, yeah. So like it was just like the thing. It's like, I started every match with a leg lariat, kick to the face or something, or an inseguri. Like, it was always an attack. I would do a flying attack on someone, like, as soon as the bell rang or while the other person was getting announced, like, any way I could try to sneak it in, you know.
So were you a heel when you were a wrestler then?
I was a babyface for a bit, and then I turned heel on Joey Ryan. He was my tag partner. Mm-hmm. And then
that's Mike's favorite wrestler, by the way. Oh,
okay. Right. Because he touches himself in the ring?
Yeah, pretty much.
Fair enough.
Mike's not on mic, so he can't answer.
He just nodded violently. He's so excited about it. He doesn't have a mic to say that. He didn't do that. And then so after me and Joey split, I was the heel, Joey was the baby face, but I was getting baby face reactions. Because out of us two, I was the more technical wrestler. And then I was an asshole. So I was a better wrestler and an asshole. And people are like, oh, yeah, that's fun to watch, you know? So, and then so that's when I was trying to go for my, like, Shawn Michaels push there.
So did you pose naked with a belt?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
No one else saw me, but it was in my room. And then I was just essentially a tweener, basically for the rest of my career. I always played the heel, but I always get mixed reactions.
Oh.
So
What did you prefer?
I like playing heel because I'm a bit of a control freak. So it's like a lot of my matches, like even when I was in tag, I'm the one that plans the matches. Like Joey would go, okay, just tell me what I'm doing, and then you go do Joey stuff. And but he knew it's what I like to do anyways. Like it didn't matter. He didn't really need to be there because he was going to think of something, and I was going to try to think of a way to do whatever he thought of better. So he goes, you just do it. So, which is good. It was good for me. I like doing it. So yeah, usually that's kind of how it runs, like in the ring especially. The babyface isn't usually the one that dictates the pace of the match and how it's going. They can, if the face is the veteran and he knows how to control the heel, he can dictate the pace, but it's usually the other way around. The heel is the one that's observing the crowd and seeing how everything's going. Should it go faster? Should it go slower? And then so it left me in charge, which I like.
Yeah, it looks like it's more fun to be the heel also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You talk crazy crap to people. You don't need to worry about what people think of you because it's like you're the bad guy. You're supposed to not like me.
Yeah.
It sounds like how I want to live my life. So cute. And then just do like a Rick and Morty, like middle finger to everybody, like in a circle. That's my ideal life right there.
I love Rick and Morty. It's so good.
We talked about how you got out of wrestling. How'd you get into wrestling, or what drew you towards it?
I've watched. So there's 3 constants in my life. It's like basketball, wrestling, and comic books. Like those are the 3 things that always have seemed to be around.
Who's your
like,
basketball team then?
Oh, the Lakers.
Okay, good job. Good job.
When I was a kid, those 3 things were comics. Comics. I always liked comic books ever since I was a little kid because I loved art. And basketball and wrestling were always on the TV. So it was just like I grew up with it around. And then like when I was a teenager, I think like 17, 18-ish, I started having backyard wrestling matches with my friends. But it wasn't like crazy stuff. We weren't like cutting ourselves or anything like that. It was like I would write the matches and we would do the matches and then we would record it and then we'd go inside and we'd watch the matches and it was fun. And one of the guys ended up bringing his best friend who was super into wrestling also, and he actually wanted to be a pro wrestler, which I never thought of as a possibility. I just never even thought about it. And he goes, hey, man, you should really think about coming up to L.A. with me. My girlfriend found this flyer for Ultimate University, which was UPW. That's where John Cena and Victoria, that's where they trained. And I was like, all right, sure. So we went up one day in the middle of the week. We watched a practice, and a lot of the guys were our size. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, this is crazy. Like, because on TV, they're all giant. And
they're all like 6'5", 250 pounds.
Yeah, like Bret Hart back in the day was like considered small. And he's like 6'2", I think.
That's insane.
Right? 6'1", 6'2". And it's like he was one of the small guys. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. So, but yeah, a lot of the guys in training, they were our size. My partner was like 5'7", I'm 5'9". And we're like, oh, man, we got to go do this now. And that's when we started training. And me and him were like there was another guy that was good, and then there was a couple people that were like half decent, and one of my buddies, he had already trained a bit, so he was also good, but we were the only ones that were excelling out of our starter class.
Nice.
And so we're like, hey, we're actually all right at this, we're pretty good. And so we just kept going, and then right away, like, we were getting a nice reaction from the fans and stuff like that.
I guess how did you ever I know that you're one of the founders of PWG. Like, how did that come about?
We just wanted more places to work. Yeah. Like, a lot of the small indies, they were putting on a few shows, like maybe last a year or less or something, and then they would die. Yeah. And then we were like, we need more places to work. We're running out of places to work. Like, everyone's fighting for, like, we were always good. We didn't have to worry about our spots, like, 'cause we were popular in the SoCal area. But we're like, we need to create something else. And I, a while back, I had thought of the idea of doing my own Fed and it was going to be run at the marketplace. Everyone ran at the marketplace. You'd get these cheap starter feds, and they'd always start at the marketplace. And I was like, hey, we can do one of those. I know all of these wrestlers. I could let them know, like, hey, no one will get paid more than the other. Whatever we make at the gate, we'll all split evenly. Like, we'll do the cost of the rental of the area and the ring, and then everything after that, we'll all split equally. And then so some people were down for it, and then just kind of never came about. But then Joey had mentioned, like, hey, we should actually do that, but like at a better venue, and not with like.
So that hall in Reseda was a better venue?
It didn't start there.
Oh, it didn't start there?
Yeah, there's been some dodgy venues. So I think our first show was at Frankensons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, our very first show was at Frankensons.
Oh, where was that?
It's in
the City of Industry.
City of Industry.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, but have you? It's like a mini Comic-Con every week. Yeah, everyone sells comic books, toys.
And then you would run a show out of there?
Yeah, there was a big area that you could rent. There was a show, AWS. They would run there, and so we were like, oh, we could rent this space out, and so we did for the very first show because we couldn't find anything else.
Got it.
And then our second venue was some other hall, and then that lasted one show, and it was like brutal. It was very hot, and then funny enough, we ended up in the Sweatbox. That's what we called the third venue. We were there for quite a while, and then we ended up eventually in Reseda, and it seemed good. For what it was.
And then were you living out here in San Diego while you were doing that? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was driving every week.
Yeah.
Damn.
At one point, I debated on moving up there, and then I was like, oh, wait, no, I hate LA.
It's
too
not
much
for
traffic.
everybody.
Yeah, I was like, there's too much traffic. I'm like, I can't do it. It's that was what, it's not LA, right? It's LA traffic. I should be more specific.
Yeah.
Because, like, I would drive up like 10 at night, thinking, all right, I'm going to skip all this traffic.
No, you'll just hit it.
Yeah, there's traffic still. I'm all, why is there traffic right now?
Yeah.
I'm like, it is 11:30.
That's happened at like 11:30, and then I'm like coming home from Disneyland, and then I'm like, it's going to be fine. And then I'm like, what the hell am I sitting in?
Yeah, it's brutal. And I was just like, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
Like, San Diego, if you're from San Diego, you live in San Diego, you know the traffic patterns. Like, okay, between this time going north is awful.
Yeah.
So you just try not to do that unless you're going to work. And that's why everybody's on the freeway, because they're going to work.
Yeah.
And it's just like when people are coming and going from work, that's when there's issues.
Yeah.
But that's it. And once you know that, you're fine.
Yeah.
But LA, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, you're screwed almost all the time.
Yeah. I saw a post from Kieran. I forgot her last name. Kieran, we had her on the podcast a few last
She runs
month.
Fil-Ams Fest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just was curious, like, what has been the Filipino American, like, San Diego support of, like, what you've been doing for?
I actually met Kieran at San Diego Comic Fest. It's a very small comic convention. It was started by the people who started the very first Comic-Con, and I love that show. That's my favorite show. And that was my very first show I had ever done. And it's like everyone there wants to buy comics. Like, that's what they're there for. They're for comics and art. And it's always a great show. But I met her and her husband Ben there. Ben came by with their kids, and I was just like, oh, hey, like, he stopped and he's like, oh man, I really like your art and this and that. And then I had mentioned, I was just like, oh yeah, this is my book, The Second Shift. It has Filipino brother and sister. He's like, oh, no way. And then so I was telling him about it, and he was looking at his kids, and he's like, oh, what do you think, guys? What do you think? And they're just like, like, they're like, little, they're small, whatever. They don't care about that. And so he's like, well, whatever, I'm into it. And so he bought all the books, and he was walking by. We had these bundle packs from Free Comic Book Day that SoCal Comics had given us, because we always work with them closely. And then they're like, yeah, if someone buys books, you could give them these free comics, right? And so I had like 5 of those. I'm like, oh, I want to get these out of my bag. I don't need these in my bag. But I saw Ben walking by, and I was like, I flagged him down, and I was like, hey man, come here. And then so I gave him a bundle pack, and I was like, oh, what do you like? Because I had like a Buffy bundle pack, and I was like, what do you guys like more? And then or DC, and so she took one of them, and then she saw one of the characters. He has Bionic Man. He has like something is similar to a Filipino sun on his shirt, but it's his logo. So like the rays of the sun. I broke them off into like 2 because they're like kind of looks like a house, right?
Okay.
If for people that don't know what the rays look like, they kind of look like a Monopoly house. And then
yeah, that is
so I put 2 of them together and turned it sideways, and it makes a B. And then I even put the ray lines that it has in it. So like I did that. So his Bionic Man. So I created a B out of it. So she looked at it and she goes, oh, and then I was just like, oh yeah, and then Ben mentioned, oh yeah, he's the one that has a Filipino character. She got super psyched. And then so she was telling me about the Fil-Ams Fest, and she actually wants me to participate.
Oh, nice.
So she said she's gonna contact me soon about
Cool.
it. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any? I'm trying to think of other questions.
I guess it's funny. I knew you as a wrestler, obviously. Didn't know you were Filipino.
Mm.
You kind of made me tell. And it wasn't until I read Second Shift and I saw Filipino characters. I was like, I think I asked you where I messaged you.
I think you did, yeah. I think I remember you said, you like, and we had already met.
Yeah.
And then you're like, dude, are you Filipino? Like, yeah. and it's funny too, because my last year and a half, my gear actually has a Filipino flag. Like I wear a singlet style gear, and in between the shoulder blades on the back, it had the Filipino flag.
Oh.
And I always liked the old 80s and 90s wrestlers. They would have like the Japanese wrestlers would come over and they had the Japanese flag on their trunks. And then same like I think the British Bulldogs, they had the Union Jack on their trunks, and even when they were working in Japan, they would specifically kind of like have the Union Jack and stuff.
Davey Boy still does that.
I love it.
Stuff. Yeah.
And so I always thought that was cool. Like they actually had like a patch, like a Japanese patch, and I was like, or there was American wrestlers that would go to Japan, they would have the American patch, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. I'm gonna put the Filipino flag on mine. I'm like, this is sick. This is gonna be cool. And then. Yeah, it's like it was funny too because like an old redneck got a show. He's like, "Hey man, what's that patch on your back?" I was like, "Oh, you're old. You should know what a Filipino flag is." But whatever. But they're rednecks, so whatever.
What's been your this is gonna be hard, but like, what's your favorite memory, like wrestling, or because you talked about how you wrestled Muda, and then you did a poster of Muda.
Yeah.
And then like...
Did I talk about that on the pod, or was that before the pod?
That was before.
Okay.
You were mentioning that. And then like... So, in comparison to like your wrestling career and then your comics career, like what has been the highlight for you?
Okay, so... Just for the podcast listeners, so I do freelance work for it's called Pro Wrestling Loot. And so I do wrestling-related art on there. And so I have had Bret Hart, Jake the Snake, Great Muda, like they've all signed like giant pieces of mine. And the guy that does the Pro Wrestling Loot, he would send me that stuff. So seeing that stuff is super exciting. I actually wrestled Great Muda, and that was probably the highlight of my wrestling career, I would say. It's like, if you don't know, he's like equivalent to like a Japanese Hulk Hogan. And so it's just like, oh, I could be done now if I wanted to, right? And what was super cool about that was before the show, I met him, and then he asked me to get my partner. And then so I walked up with Joey, and I was like, oh, this is my partner. And he looked at both of us. He looked at Joe, and he looked at me and goes, you, all spots. so he chose me to do all the spots with. And so that was
that intimidating, or were you
no,
like...
it was friggin' rad. It was like him going, oh, you're clearly more competent.
You're like, sorry, Joey, but I'm gonna do this.
I was like, whatever, man. this is all for me.
Did you get misted?
Yeah, I got everything. I got the Shining Wizard. I got the Mist. I got the Dragon Screw. So a fun story about the Dragon Screw is he was trying to signal me that he was going to do the Dragon Screw. He was working my leg. And then he picked me up and he grabbed my leg and he did like this knee jerk, but it kind of felt like he lifted it up when he did it. So I took a back bump. Mm-hmm. And because like, oh, he's pulling me off my feet, right? And then so he did it 3 times, and that was not his intent. So on the third one, he picked up and he leaned real close and he goes, Dragon Screw, motherfucker.
How
And I was
do
like,
you not laugh? I don't understand.
I was terrified. I was like, oh, I've been fucking up one of his things this whole time right here. And then so I was like, that was awesome, and I feel bad, but we did it and it came off good. And so like I think it comes off fine in the match, because as soon as he, like, my reaction time back then was really good. So every time he would do the leg lift or the jerk, I would instantly bump very, very quickly. It's like, oh, I'm going to move as fast as possible for him to make him look like he's destroying me. So that was a fun part of the match. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Oh, and comics wise, I would say the highlight for comics, I haven't had a high like that. It's like I'm still trying to build my comics name up. I think I've only been tabling like 6 years maybe. So I have a lot of time. But I would say it's getting fan email, like people writing letters and saying, I just got one recently. It was a guy I went to Phoenix. Phoenix was the first show I did, Phoenix Fan Fusion. And a guy picked up all the books. And I hadn't mentioned the Filipino brother and sister. He was a white guy. And I didn't mention that. And I'll usually mention it if the person looks Filipino. And then like I'll still kind of fill it out too. But anyway, he's a white guy, so I didn't mention it, right? And then for some reason he brought up his wife being Filipino. Like that got brought up somehow. Like maybe I brought it up, maybe he brought it up. But I was like, oh, well, just so you know, there's a Filipino brother and sister in the comic. Then he got super excited about it, and I was just like, awesome, man. And I'm like, well, I'm excited for you and your wife to read the books. And so he emailed me a couple weeks ago, and he was just like, I'm sorry it took me so long to respond, to email you. He goes, but I lost your card, and I couldn't find it. I just found it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he was just really going into detail what he liked about the book, and it was like deep cut stuff. It was just like, I really like this. I really like the character interaction, and I like that you had mentioned that you were an X-Men fan, and I could really feel those hits, those X-Men hits in there, like late 80s, early 90s. I could really feel it, and I really liked that part of it. And he goes, you got a lot of good action. I love the art and the writing. And he goes, but what I like the most is the character interaction, like the development of those characters and how they talk to each other. And I was like, man, this is all the stuff that I'm trying to convey to people. Like, these are the things I like about comics. And the fact that all of those things were hitting with him, it was like very fulfilling. It was very rewarding. So when you're feeling like, as a creator, it's like, oh man, it's such a grind to do these conventions. It's like you have to try to stop people and convince them, hi, I'm a stranger, you should buy my product. You know, it's like, it's very difficult. And then so when you finally get someone to do it and they touch like all of the things that you love about being a creator, and when they read it, it's like, oh man, this is truly satisfying. And it gives you a boost, you know. If you're feeling down or just kind of tired, it really boosts you back up
to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I've done that at like different random like bookstores. If I've seen like a comic that's Filipino, I will like run the table and I will buy like all the editions. So like, I encourage people listening to this, if you go to a comic book show and you see Accidental Aliens or Scott Lost there tabling, run the table and buy all the comics that he has for sale.
Please do.
Because he's awesome and he's rad and his stories are amazing. I do remember that when you hit Scott up, Berto, about second mission, right?
Second shift.
Yep. That you had mentioned to me, like, hey, this character's Filipino, and I think I just went into it. I'm like, okay, I'll just pick it. I'll look at it, and then I was like, I really like this story. I hope this goes somewhere. I was like, oh, okay, yes. Everybody read this. Everybody read it. Everybody buy it. Everybody give Scott your money. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm doing another book too. So I'm doing 2 books at once, and like kind of a third book will be like a short story. But I do another book. It's called Wanderers of Melisande. And you guys probably heard me pitching this at the booth. It's to people. It's 1,000 years in the future, we start colonizing other planets, and we come across the planet Melisande, where the meteor never hit, and then so the dinosaurs of that world survived and evolved. And it's about 2 dominant species trying to coexist on one planet, and that never goes well.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. I picked it up. I can't wait to read it. The cover is awesome because it's like a dude who looks like he's a warrior, and he has like armor on, but then he has like Nike sneakers on.
Yeah, I altered the sign because I was like, oh, I don't want to get sued or anything. I have no money.
They're Nike-esque, but not necessarily. They're trainers.
They look like
Air Force Ones.
They are actually the Kobe Bruce Lee editions.
There you go.
Yeah. No, they're not those.
No, they're not. And
Nike.
the character has like Arnie sticks, so like that is cool.
Yeah. Oh, I noticed his shoulder armor. It looks like the sun.
Yeah, so I altered. Since it's 1,000 years in the future, I amalgamized all languages. So there's some Tagalog, there's some Japanese in there, and there's some going to be some Chinese and made-up language as well.
Nice.
And then so it's just going to be like this amalgam language that they speak on. It's like not all the time, but it's just, like Spanglish or something, right?
Yeah.
Like you just kind of mix it in.
Cool.
So I since it's been so long, I started altering the Filipino sun. So it was just like it's a circle, and then the rays are broken off into their own pieces as opposed to it being together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're just broken off, and that's kind of where when I was coming up with that design, it initially was for Bionic Man, for his logo on the chest, because like I didn't want it to be too cheesy where it's just like the big Filipino, his whole gear is just the Filipino flag, like what you traditionally see. And so I was just like, you know what, I want to switch it up. So I created that sun, but then I was like, I don't know, it just didn't feel right with him. And then, but since I had the rays broken up, that's when I got the idea of turning them sideways and making a B out of it. And but then I was like, I want to use that for something. And I thought it was perfect for Wanderers.
Cool. Everybody get that too. Buy all the things. Buy anything that he has, because we want to support.
And you can
Filipino
go
artists.
to accidentalaliens.com. That's my studio site. And if you go there, you can do accidentalaliens.com/shop. Or pretty much if you just go on the site, it's like on the main page, so you'll be able to find all that stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. What's the question that you're asking everybody at the end of the show?
Oh, well, it's different because you're actually a wrestler, because we've been asking people, like, oh, what would your wrestling theme song be?
What was your wrestling? What was it then?
It was Moment of Clarity by Jay-Z.
Nice.
And I always liked it. Like, the intro is really... I actually had one of my friends alter the intro, because like there's a build-up in the song, and there's a part in the beginning where it says turn the lights down low. It's like turn up the mic, turn the lights down low, and then there's a part where he goes whoop, and he does his like Jay-Z noise.
Yeah.
And so I had my buddy cut that to the beginning, and I always want, like in my head, I'd always see it at like I wanted like the promotions to do it.
Yeah.
Like when he says turn the lights down, I wanted the lights to go down.
Okay.
And then so when he go whoop, the lights would come back on, and then it would go, thank God for granting me this moment of clarity. And that's like when the entrance
How
started.
many times did that actually happen though?
Never, not once. Not even in the Fed that I owned a part of. And I always like this, like the song's awesome. If you guys haven't heard that song, find it. It's on the Jay-Z Black album, Moment of Clarity. And it's just, I kind of like the idea, because like my name's Scott Lost. Like it's because my tag team was the Lost Boys when I first started. That's where it comes from. But I like the idea of the word lost, like you're lost, you're confused or whatever, and then you have this moment of clarity. So I always loved that. It's like poetic in a way. So yeah. I also came out to, when I was a face, I came out to Somebody Save Me, the Smallville by Remy Zero.
Yeah.
I came out to that because I was kind of a rocker. Like when we were in the X Foundation, we were kind of like rocker-esque.
Yeah.
So I would do the run around and hit all the high fives and stuff, and
Nice.
then slide in the ring and high energy and just be tired by the time I got into the ring.
You're all
Yeah.
gassed, like I can't
I
do
was
this
like,
anymore.
oh, that was a huge mistake. I shouldn't have done that. It was awful.
Wait,
I
so
had
what-
like, I think 4 songs or something, and there was like oh man, Joey. We had I think Renegades of Funk.
Rage
was
Against the Machine.
Rage Against the
Yeah.
Machine. And then, oh shoot, we had a weird one as the Dynasty. We had a weird tag music. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, so.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. I have no other things because this has been amazing.
Right on.
And I'm really excited that this is going to be a crossover between TFAL and PNG. We're Filipino, so I'm only going to say acronyms and not explain them all because that's how this works. And we talk in acronyms. Thank you so much. Where Again, where can people find you, Scott?
On social media, you can find me Twitter and Instagram at Scott Lost, or on Facebook, it's facebook.com/ I think it's just Scott Lost, and Accidental Aliens. And if you go to Accidental Aliens first, there's all of our pictures there. If you click on my picture, all of my social media is attached to that.
Cool. And Berto?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Brainiac the MC, and you can find the PNG Podcast on Instagram at PNG Podcast.
And Justin is going to use Berto's mic, and that's why he wasn't on for the rest of it, because we couldn't hear him.
You can find me at Justin Malari on Instagram and Justin_Malari on Twitter. And I also host another show for the Geek Say What Network called Geek Offensive. Subscribe and download on Apple Podcasts.
Can I base your performance on those podcasts off of this podcast?
Yeah, I'm just really quiet for an hour and a half on every show.
I hope you guys just stare at each other.
Yes.
And then the guest just gets like panicky and just starts rambling on.
You just hear like rustling as they're leaving, and that's it.
And where can they find you, Mike?
What?
Completely thrown off and surprised. That was Producer Mike, guys.
Hi.
That was him. He was right there. You can find This Filipino American Life at TFAL Podcast and thisfilipinoamericanlife.com. And that was this. And thank you so much. We're at San Diego Comic-Con 2019. And I guess that's it. We're out. This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.